Ethan Carlisle lived a life that most people could only dream of. He was a billionaire, known for his sharp business mind, his luxurious lifestyle, and his influence in every important industry he touched. From the outside, everything about him seemed perfect. His skyscraper office overlooked the city. His penthouse apartment was filled with priceless art, and his garage held the most expensive cars anyone could imagine. Every detail of his life was carefully curated, and people admired him for his wealth, his power, and his confidence. Yet, behind the glittering surface, Ethan's life was not as perfect as it seemed. He woke up every day to a strict schedule, meetings stacked back-to-back, calls from CEOs, investors, and government officials. Even his personal life seemed planned. Dinners, charity events, and social gatherings were on his calendar weeks in advance. But there was a quiet emptiness he could never shake. No matter how many trophies, watches, or awards he collected, he often felt alone. Ethan had friends, of course, but most were drawn to his money and status rather than him. Conversations rarely went deeper than business deals or surface-level compliments. His family relationships were strained too. He rarely found time for them. And when he did, arguments often arose over things he could not control. Even his heart, which longed for connection and understanding, felt trapped behind walls built of wealth and success. On one particularly quiet evening, Ethan returned to his penthouse after a long day of board meetings and negotiations. His assistant had already left, and the house was silent except for the faint hum of the city below. He stepped into the grand hallway. Taking off his expensive watch and loosening his tie, the apartment smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers. But even this small comfort felt hollow. As he walked toward his bedroom, he paused to glance at the pictures lining the walls. Images of business achievements, awards, and luxurious vacations stared back at him, but none of them captured the happiness or warmth he secretly longed for. He remembered simpler times, moments from his childhood when laughter was easy and love felt natural. Not this forced perfection, not this life where everything came at a price. Despite his success, Ethan often felt a sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something was missing. He had built a world where everyone admired him, but no one truly knew him. The more he achieved, the more isolated he became. Each deal won, and each award earned seemed to push him further from genuine happiness. Yet he told himself that this was the price of success, that the life he had built was worth the sacrifices. That night, as he reached his bedroom door, he felt a strange tension, a flicker of anticipation he could not explain. Normally, entering his bedroom was a simple, routine act, but tonight felt different. It was as if something beyond his understanding was waiting for him. Something that could shake the carefully balanced life he had created. He didn't know what it was, but deep down, he felt it would change everything. Ethan opened the door slowly, almost cautiously, pausing to steady his breath. In that moment, the perfect life he had worked so hard to build, with its wealth, luxury, and admiration, seemed fragile, as if one unexpected moment could reveal cracks he had never noticed. And though he had spent years controlling everything around him, he realized that life had a way of surprising even the most powerful people. This was the moment where the story truly began. The billionaire who appeared to have everything was about to face a truth that no amount of money could fix. A truth hidden behind the doors of his own home. A secret that would test his heart, his values, and his very understanding of what it meant to be alive. Ethan Carlisle's perfect life, as admired by the world, was about to be challenged in ways he could never imagine. And though he did not yet know it, this night would mark the start of a journey that would change him forever. That night, Ethan could not shake the feeling that something was different. He had finished a long day of work, handled emails, calls, and endless negotiations. But as he walked through the silent hallways of his penthouse, a strange tension hung in the air. The lights glowed softly, casting shadows on the walls, and the polished floors reflected the faint hum of the city far below. Yet, something felt off, a whisper in the silence that made him pause. At first, he told himself it was just his imagination. After all, the penthouse was quiet, empty, and he was alone. But then he heard it again, a faint sound, almost like someone moving, soft footsteps on the marble, too light for a regular person, too deliberate to be the wind. His heartbeat quickened, and a chill ran down his spine. He glanced at the security monitors on his phone. Everything seemed normal. No one was in the hallways, no alarms triggered, and yet he could feel the presence of something unusual. Ethan slowly approached his bedroom door, the strange noises growing slightly louder. There was a rhythm, a pattern, as if someone, or something, was moving deliberately. He reached for the doorknob, hesitating for a moment, his hand trembling. His mind raced through all possibilities. Intruder, staff member, a prank, maybe even a dream. Yet his instinct screamed that this was neither ordinary nor expected. The whispers became slightly clearer, almost like muffled voices, words he could not understand. They seemed familiar and yet strange, as if someone close to him was there, but not really. The air in the room felt heavier, thick with anticipation, and Ethan realized his life of control, wealth, and certainty offered no preparation for this strange, creeping fear. He took a deep breath and told himself to stay calm, though every nerve in his body screamed otherwise. As he turned the knob, his mind raced with questions. Who could be there? Was it a threat or a surprise? The anticipation was unbearable, each second stretching longer than the last. He pushed the door open slowly, just a crack, peeking inside, and for a moment, his imagination ran wild, envisioning burglars, intruders, even ghosts. Every fear he had buried beneath his confidence and money seemed to surface at once. But when he opened the door fully, what he saw did not match any of his fears. The room seemed ordinary, untouched, yet there was something subtle, something hidden that made him freeze. His eyes scanned the space. The bed perfectly made, the lights soft and warm. Nothing appeared out of place. And yet the feeling of being watched, of someone or something having been there, lingered, pressing against him like a weight he could not lift. He stepped cautiously inside, trying to listen. The sound now completely gone. The silence was louder than any noise, and it made him even more alert. As he moved closer to the bed, he noticed a small object on the floor, something he had never seen before, a folded note, placed carefully as if waiting for him. Ethan's curiosity battled with fear, and he bent down slowly, unfolding it with trembling hands. The note had only a few words, written in a familiar handwriting that made his heart skip a beat. The message was simple yet shocking, hinting at secrets he had never imagined, promises broken, truths hidden, and a revelation that would change the course of his life forever. Ethan felt a mixture of disbelief, anger, and deep curiosity. His perfect life, filled with wealth, luxury, and control, was suddenly fragile, as if one small secret could shake everything he had built. Standing there, with the note in his hand, Ethan realized that life had a way of surprising even the most powerful people. Wealth could not protect him from shock, money could not shield him from truth, and control could not prevent unexpected revelations. That night marked the beginning of a journey that would test him in ways he had never imagined, forcing him to confront hidden truths, his own vulnerabilities, and the reality that even billionaires cannot escape the mysteries that life holds. Ethan's hand lingered on the bedroom doorknob, his heart pounding in his chest. The strange noises he had heard earlier were gone, but a heavy tension filled the air, as if the room itself were holding its breath. He slowly pushed the door open, expecting maybe an intruder, maybe a prank, or even a mistake of his imagination. But what he saw made him freeze in disbelief. The room looked ordinary at first, the bed perfectly made, the curtains drawn just enough to let the moonlight in. But then his eyes caught something that made him step back, his mind racing to process it. On the floor, near the edge of the bed, lay a small, sealed envelope, its paper thick, with his name written in a handwriting he thought he recognized but could not place immediately. Ethan's pulse quickened, a mix of fear and curiosity flooding his senses. He bent down slowly, picked up the envelope, and felt a strange warmth radiate from it, as if it carried a life of its own. With trembling hands, he broke the seal, unfolding a single sheet of paper, and the words written on it made his stomach drop. The message was brief, but every word carried weight, hinting at truths he had never imagined, secrets hidden within the people closest to him. and events that had unfolded behind his back. Ethan's mind flashed back to moments he had long forgotten, subtle gestures, fleeting glances, conversations that now took on a completely different meaning. Everything suddenly fit into place, but instead of relief, a wave of shock and disbelief washed over him. He realized that the life he had carefully built, the image of control and perfection, was based on incomplete truths, and some of those closest to him had been hiding critical pieces of reality. The note hinted at betrayal, but not the kind he had expected. It was not a theft of money or a corporate plot, but something more personal, something that touched the very core of his private world. Ethan felt a knot in his chest as he tried to grasp the enormity of what he was reading. The people he had trusted, the routines he had followed, the perfect life he thought he had. Everything suddenly felt fragile, like a castle built on sand. As he looked around the room again, he noticed subtle changes he hadn't seen before. A chair slightly moved, a book out of place, details so small they would have gone unnoticed on any other day. But now, with a note in his hands, they felt like clues left deliberately for him to discover. Someone had planned this. Someone had chosen this moment for him to see the truth, and the realization both terrified and intrigued him. Ethan sank onto the edge of the bed, holding the note close, and tried to calm his racing thoughts. He went over every relationship, every recent interaction, and realized that trust was more fragile than he had ever believed. The shocking discovery was not just the message itself, but the fact that he had been blind for so long, trusting appearances, assuming that wealth, status, and control could protect him from life's surprises. Even as fear and disbelief gripped him, a spark of determination ignited. Ethan knew that he could not ignore what he had just found. The note was a key, a first step into uncovering a deeper truth, and he could either run from it or confront it. He realized that the next steps would define not only his understanding of others, but also his own strength, courage, and ability to face reality. For the first time in a long while, the billionaire who had controlled everything around him felt powerless, yet alive. The shocking discovery had ripped away the comfort of ignorance and forced him to confront life in its rawest, most unpredictable form. And even though he did not yet understand the full story, one thing was clear. His perfect life had ended, and a journey of truth, revelation, and transformation had just begun. Ethan stood frozen in his bedroom, the note still trembling in his hand. The words on the paper were simple, yet they carried a weight that seemed to crush him. He had never imagined that someone so close could hide something so profound, something that threatened to tear apart not just his perfect image, but the very foundation of his life. For a moment, he felt anger bubbling inside him. Anger at the deception, at the lies, and at himself for being blind. He sank into the edge of his bed, trying to make sense of it all. Memories flooded his mind. Moments he had dismissed as small or insignificant now seemed like pieces of a larger puzzle. Faces of people he trusted, conversations he had laughed through, gestures he had ignored. They all seemed different, as if a veil had been lifted and he was seeing them for the first time. Ethan realized that control was an illusion, and the life he had built on appearances was fragile and vulnerable. The billionaire, who had commanded boardrooms, made decisions affecting millions, and faced ruthless competitors without fear, now felt powerless. There was no contract, no negotiation, no money that could fix this. The only thing he could do was confront it, confront the truth he had avoided for so long. He took a deep breath and began calling the people he thought he could trust, each ring sending a jolt of anxiety through him. First came silence, then hesitation, then explanations that seemed rehearsed. Ethan listened carefully, trying to separate truth from manipulation. He realized that some of the answers he received only deepened his confusion. The more he learned, the more he understood that reality was not something he could command. It had a life of its own, unpredictable and relentless. And sometimes it hit without warning, shaking everything you thought was solid. As the night grew darker, Ethan moved through his penthouse like a man haunted. Each room seemed different now. Familiar objects appearing strange, ordinary things suddenly carrying weight and meaning. He picked up a framed photograph from the mantelpiece, staring at it for a long time, and wondered how much of his life had been real and how much had been a carefully constructed illusion to impress the world. He felt both anger and sorrow, rage at those who deceived him, sadness for his own blindness. But beneath all that, a small spark of determination ignited. Ethan realized that he could not change the past. He could not undo the secrets or lies. What he could do was confront the present and decide how he would move forward. He would face the people, the truths, and the consequences, no matter how uncomfortable or painful. The billionaire who had mastered wealth and power now had to master the human heart, something far more complicated and delicate. He thought about what this revelation meant for him personally, not just for his public image. It was a lesson that no amount of money could teach, a lesson about honesty, trust, and vulnerability. Ethan understood that facing reality was not just about finding answers. It was about accepting truths, learning from them, and growing stronger. He realized that life was not a game to be won, but a journey to be navigated, full of unexpected challenges and lessons. By the time the first light of morning touched his penthouse windows, Ethan felt different, lighter yet more aware. He knew the confrontation with reality was only beginning, that the path ahead would be filled with difficult conversations, emotional struggles, and shocking discoveries. But for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to face it all, ready to step into the truth, no matter how painful or complicated. The perfect life he thought he had was gone, but what awaited him now was something far more real, far more human, and far more important. After the confrontation with reality, Ethan felt like the ground beneath him had disappeared. The world he had built with wealth, power, and control suddenly seemed fragile, like glass ready to shatter at the slightest touch. He sat alone in his bedroom, the notes still on the floor, staring at nothing, yet seeing everything, memories, secrets, and half-truths played in his mind like a relentless storm. He realized that his carefully curated life had left him unprepared for raw human emotion. At first, Ethan felt anger, sharp and consuming, anger at the people who had hidden the truth, anger at himself for being blind, anger at the universe for testing him in ways no money could solve. He replayed conversations in his mind, tried to detect the hidden meanings he had missed. Every laugh, every gesture, every promise now seemed layered with deception, and the thought made his chest tighten. Then came confusion, heavy and disorienting. Ethan could not understand why life had dealt him such a blow. He had done everything right according to the world's standards. He worked hard, achieved success, and gained influence. But this had not protected him. This was not about money, fame, or power. It was about human truth, trust, and the vulnerabilities that even billionaires cannot escape. Sadness followed, deep and relentless. Ethan felt a hollow ache as he realized how isolated he truly was. Friends who had seemed close now appeared distant. Family relationships that he thought were strong felt fragile and strained. For all his success, he had ignored the simple, human connections that truly mattered. The emptiness he had always felt suddenly became undeniable. And for the first time, he understood that wealth could not fill the gaps left by truth and love. Fear crept in next, subtle but sharp. Ethan worried about the consequences of what he had discovered, about the secrets that might spill into the open, and about the people he might lose. The walls of his perfect life felt like they were closing in, suffocating him with uncertainty. He realized that control, the thing he had valued above all, was powerless in the face of raw emotion and hidden truth. But amidst the storm of anger, sadness, and fear, a small clarity emerged. Ethan began to understand that the emotional fallout, painful as it was, offered him something he had never had before: honesty, even if it hurt, even if it threatened his world. The truth was a light that could guide him forward. He understood that he could not change the past, he could not undo the lies, but he could decide how to face them, how to rebuild, and how to grow. The billionaire who had spent decades mastering business and money now realized he needed to master himself, to confront his emotions rather than bury them under luxury and routine. Ethan felt a strange sense of liberation in this painful truth. He realized that vulnerability was not weakness, that confronting reality with honesty and courage was far more important than maintaining an image of perfection. As the night stretched on, Ethan reflected on his journey, on the life he thought he had, and on the life he could now create. He knew it would be difficult, that there would be heartbreak, tough conversations, and more shocking revelations. But for the first time, he felt prepared, ready to face whatever came next with a clear mind and an open heart. The emotional fallout had stripped him of illusions, but it had also given him a chance to live more fully, to connect more deeply, and to embrace a truth that no wealth could ever buy. By the early morning, Ethan rose from the bed, stronger, calmer, and more determined than he had been in years. He knew the journey ahead would be hard, but he also knew that this was the moment where the real life of Ethan Carlisle truly began, no longer defined only by money and status, but by resilience, honesty, and the courage to face the truths that most people avoid. The next morning, Ethan woke with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The emotional storm from the night before had settled just enough for him to think clearly, but the questions still burned inside him. He could not ignore what he had discovered. He had to know the truth, every hidden detail, every secret that had been kept from him. No amount of money, influence, or power could replace the understanding he sought. He began by reviewing everything he could, the note, his security footage, and the small inconsistencies he had noticed in people's behavior over the past months. Every detail mattered, no matter how small. He replayed conversations in his mind, reread old messages, and examined relationships that had once seemed ordinary. Now, each interaction felt like a puzzle piece, a clue to a bigger picture he was desperate to uncover. Ethan reached out to the people closest to him, not angrily, but carefully, asking questions that were polite on the surface but probing underneath. The first few calls were met with hesitation, vague answers, and even defensiveness. It was clear that some people had expected him to ignore the truth, to accept life as it had always been, but Ethan was no longer willing to do that. As the day went on, Ethan noticed patterns he had never seen before, subtle signs that pointed to motives, alliances, and hidden actions. The people around him were not simply actors in his life. They were players with agendas, some benign, some dangerous, and some deeply personal. The realization both terrified and intrigued him. He had always dealt with business secrets, corporate betrayals, and financial risks. But this was different. It was personal, intimate, and far more complicated. He decided to confront those involved directly, meeting them one by one, watching their reactions, listening to their words, and observing every gesture. In these encounters, Ethan learned more than he expected. Some admitted small truths, while others carefully avoided the questions. Yet even their avoidance spoke volumes. He realized that the truth was layered, complex, and required patience, observation, and courage to uncover fully. As evening approached, Ethan sat in his study, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. He thought about the journey so far, the notes, the whispers, the strange feelings, and the people he had confronted. Each piece of information felt like a thread, and he had to follow it carefully, weaving it together to understand the full tapestry of what had happened. The more he learned, the more he realized how fragile the image of a perfect life truly was. He also discovered unexpected allies, people who had quietly tried to guide him toward the truth. Their support was subtle but meaningful, reminding him that not everyone around him had hidden motives. Some truly cared, even when he had been blind to it. This gave him hope, a reminder that even amidst deception, loyalty, and honesty still existed, waiting to be found if one was willing to look carefully. By the end of the night, Ethan had pieced together a significant part of the mystery. Though questions still remained, he knew that the answers he sought were not just about exposing others. They were about understanding the choices people made, the reasons behind their actions, and the ways in which secrets could affect lives. He realized that searching for answers was not a task of confrontation alone, but of insight, empathy, and strategic thinking. Ethan understood one important truth as he finally sat back in his chair. Exhausted but focused, the journey to uncover hidden realities was just as important as the revelations themselves. It taught him patience, observation, and humility, and prepared him for the ultimate discoveries yet to come. That night, he vowed not to rest until he knew everything, until the full truth behind what he had witnessed was revealed, because only then could he truly move forward with his life. After days of searching, questioning, and observing, Ethan finally reached the point where everything began to make sense. The puzzle pieces that had haunted him for weeks slowly started to fit together, revealing a truth more shocking than he could have imagined. It was not just a secret about one person, nor was it a single event hidden from him. The reality he uncovered touched every corner of his life, every relationship, and even his own choices. Ethan sat in his study, the folded note from the first night still in his hand, reading it again, and realizing how much it had guided him without him noticing. The words seemed simple at first, but now they carried a profound weight, pointing to truths that were invisible to anyone who only looked at the surface. He had assumed he understood the people around him, but he now realized that assumptions could be dangerous. An understanding required honesty, patience, and courage. The revelation came slowly at first, as conversations, observations, and confessions connected like threads weaving a tapestry. Ethan discovered that those he trusted most had been protecting him, but not in the way he expected. Their actions were misunderstood, their silence misinterpreted, and their intentions hidden behind layers of caution and love. It was not betrayal, nor deception for personal gain. It was protection, guidance, and care disguised as secrecy. At first, Ethan felt anger, the kind of anger that comes from realizing how blind you have been. He had spent days doubting, questioning, and even confronting people he cared about, only to realize that his assumptions had been wrong. The anger slowly melted into relief as he understood that the world was not against him, that the people he loved had been silently trying to shield him from pain and disappointment. More importantly, Ethan realized a truth about himself. He had been so focused on control, on perfection, on wealth and image, that he had ignored the very essence of life: connection, trust, and genuine love. The revelation was not only about the people around him, but also about his own heart, his capacity to forgive, to understand, and to embrace vulnerability. The billionaire who had believed power could solve everything now understood that real strength came from honesty, empathy, and courage. With this understanding, Ethan felt a wave of emotion he had never allowed himself to feel. Tears welled in his eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming weight of realization. He understood that life was more than wealth, more than luxury, more than appearances. It was about relationships, choices, and the ability to navigate truth with integrity. The moment was both humbling and empowering, showing him that he could rebuild his life on a foundation stronger than money, one built on understanding, compassion, and trust. The revelation also brought clarity for the future. Ethan now knew what mattered most. He would no longer hide behind wealth or status, nor would he ignore emotions that demanded attention. He could forgive, reconcile, and grow, taking the lessons from this shocking period of his life and using them to create a life that was real, meaningful, and fulfilling. The people around him would no longer be judged by what they had kept hidden, but appreciated for their intentions and love. By the end of the day, Ethan stood by his window, looking out over the city he had always seen from above, but now he saw it differently. Every light, every shadow, every moving figure below reminded him that life was unpredictable, human, and full of lessons waiting to be discovered. He smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because he was ready to face life fully, openly, and without illusions. The billionaire who had opened his bedroom door weeks ago in disbelief had now found clarity, purpose, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly live. Ethan woke the next morning with a sense of calm he had not felt in years. The emotional storms, the confusion, and the shocking revelations of the past days had changed him profoundly. He no longer felt the heavy weight of secrets pressing down on him. Instead, he felt a lightness, a clarity, and a determination to live differently. The billionaire who had once measured success only in wealth and power now understood that true success lay in honesty, connection, and courage. He began the day by reaching out to the people he had misunderstood or judged too quickly. His words were simple, but heartfelt, full of gratitude, apology, and openness, one by one. Relationships that had been strained by assumptions and distance started to heal. Ethan discovered that when vulnerability meets sincerity, even the deepest walls can crumble. He could feel trust slowly returning. Not forced, not fragile, but real and lasting. Ethan also reflected on himself, on the man he had been before the revelations, and on the man he wanted to become. He realized that he no longer wanted to chase perfection or hide behind an image of power. Instead, he would embrace authenticity, face challenges with courage, and allow emotions to guide him as much as logic did. For the first time, he understood that strength was not about controlling life, but about navigating it with honesty and resilience. He looked around his penthouse, once a place of quiet luxury, and saw it differently. It was still beautiful, still a symbol of years of hard work, but it no longer defined him. The true value of his life was not in the furniture, the art, or the cars. It was in the lessons he had learned, the people he loved, and the integrity with which he lived. Ethan smiled, knowing that the future was not about what he had amassed, but what he could give, share, and create. That evening, Ethan walked through the city streets, blending in with the crowd for the first time in years. He observed people laughing, struggling, and living fully, realizing that life was messy, unpredictable, and extraordinary. He felt a sense of gratitude for his own journey, for the moments of shock and pain that had forced him to confront the truth. Each experience, each revelation, had been a stepping stone toward a deeper understanding of himself and the world. Ethan decided to make changes in his life that reflected this new awareness. He became more present in his relationships, more attentive to those he loved, and more willing to face challenges without fear. He also embraced new opportunities that aligned with his values, choosing projects and decisions that mattered not just financially but emotionally and ethically. It was a life reshaped, not by money, but by meaning, purpose, and connection. As night fell, Ethan returned to his bedroom, no longer a place of suspense or fear, but a sanctuary of reflection and peace. He placed a note that had started this journey on his desk, a reminder of the moment that had changed everything. He understood that life would continue to surprise him, sometimes with joy, sometimes with challenge, but he was ready, prepared to face it all with an open heart, a clear mind, and unshakable courage. Before closing his eyes, Ethan looked out the window at the city lights twinkling below, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive. He had been through shock, fear, betrayal, and revelation, but now he had found clarity, strength, and a new beginning. His life was no longer about appearances, perfection, or control. It was about authenticity, love, resilience, and the courage to embrace whatever came next. Ethan smiled, knowing that the journey was far from over, but he was ready. This was not just a billionaire opening his bedroom door and witnessing the unexpected. It was a man discovering the truth, confronting his fears, learning profound lessons, and choosing a life richer than any wealth could provide. A new chapter had begun, one filled with hope, purpose, and endless possibilities, and Ethan was finally ready to live it fully.